So today we'll be talking about beach cleans, our oceans and waters, and plastic pollution. I'm joined today by Lizzi Larbalestier, a professional blue health coach specialising in coastal coaching, based in Cornwall. So Lizzi, thank you for coming on. It's great to have you here. How has your week been?
Well, it's Monday, so it's the start of the week. So for me,
Yeah,
my weekend was amazing. My week looks like it's going to be pretty good. I think the weather's okay this week, so we can get out for some wintry walks with some clients. We've been doing some seal rescues, and we've of course been doing beach cleaning because that's part of just how we show up day to day. So yeah, how was
yeah.
your week?
Yeah, it's been pretty good. It's been pretty good. Quite busy, but yeah, looking forward to this week. So I was wondering, could you elaborate a little bit about your blue health coaching for the listeners at home?
Yeah, of course, can do. So Blue Health Coaching is coaching essentially, so helping people find solutions and set goals and achieve goals. But the Blue Health piece of it is incorporating environmental psychology, so taking people out into coastal space and working with the environment. So the environment isn't a backdrop; the environment actually is part of the coaching process. So mainly things like exploring how the landscape reflects what's going on for us as people, and looking at the qualities of the landscape to create a conversation about how do people want to show up more fully or live meaningful and purposeful lives.
Right, yeah. And I was looking on your website. It seems that you're kind of exploring like the mental connection and a spiritual connection between like the water and the person.
So essentially it's our connection to water. So that could be our social connections to water. So how we spend time in blue space with others. So the social links that we have. So like, for example, you go to the beach generally to have fun. It's not really a place that you go for seriousness. There's spiritual connections. So how things like water show up quite a lot in spiritual texts, for example, but also our spiritual natural connection to the ocean and water. Our psychological connection to water, so how it makes us feel being near, in, on, or underwater. The physical impact of being near, in, on, or underwater, so like how our body moves differently when we walk on the beach or when we're in the water, how our body responds to being in the water, and how our nervous system then works in a very different way, and that affects our mood and our behavior as a result of that. So and the emotions associated with that. So all aspects of connecting with water and how that helps our wellness.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah. So I understand you take kind of a big part in the beach cleans and stuff. So for those
Yes,
at home who are unfamiliar with beach cleans, could you tell us a little bit about them?
can do, of course. So because working out on the beach, my clients gain a lot from being around that space.
Mm.
Looking after that space is really important. So one of the things that I do around that space is lead community beach cleans as a rep for Surfers Against Sewage, but also as an ambassador for Keep Britain Tidy. So that involves getting the community together to, or not so much at the moment during COVID, but generally that involves getting people out onto the beach, whether that is in collective groups or whether that's people doing a 2-minute beach clean and having that as part of their psyche to go out onto the coast and notice and actually first of all see what's around them and recognize the aspects around the coastline that should or shouldn't be there. So and I'm fascinated by ghost fishing net. I also run a community group called Ghost Net Busters, where we pick up large industrial ghost fishing nets that are out and see and get them put back into the circular economy. And that's again really collaboratively working with Ocean Recovery Project and Odyssey Innovation, who recycle those nets and get them made back into kayaks. So
Yeah.
I think all of our community groups are really interlinked when it comes to looking after this coastal space.
Yeah,
And
I
I'm
mean
sure
that
I
sounds
think you've spoken with Rob, I know, at Odyssey, and all our groups tend to be collectively inspired to look after that space.
yeah, that sounds like kind of really comprehensive of kind of looking after of the space. I know that the fishing nets you kind of take quite a role in kind of recovery of them and also kind of breaking them down. Could you tell us
Yeah.
maybe why this is a problem, the kind of fishing nets in the waters?
Yeah. So we're Ghost Net Busters ALVFG, which stands for abandoned, lost, and discarded. So we take the stance that the fishing industry probably don't throw away deliberately nets that are usable, but nets do get lost from time to time. And those nets, then we call them ghost fishing nets because those nets continue to catch marine wildlife, and therefore that's a big issue, as well as just the plastic that's in the net being out in the ocean and therefore degrading, and you end up with all the chemicals leaching from the plastics. So not only is the plastic an issue, the fact that it's in a formed net shape that's made to capture wildlife is a big issue. And as a volunteer with British Divers Marine Life Rescue, we see more and more seal pups coming in with entanglement, not only from the more coarse net, but also from the monofilament nets, so like the gill nets that get caught around a seal pup's neck, because seal pups are really interested and curious creatures, but they get caught up in the nets, and those nets they can carry around with them for some time, and they cause huge lesions in their blubber, cut through their blubber like cheese wire. And unless we can get hold of a seal pup and take that net off it, the likelihood is that net will either cause it to die or cause really serious injuries. So ghost fishing net is a big issue. A large net. We also see what's called fishermen's kisses. We see the little offcuts of nets that again get dropped onto the beach. We see those, and again that's plastic. That's plastic that's in the environment. That's weird. There was a study. I don't know if you heard the study that was taken around what was seen as least pleasant to see on the beach. So there was a study around the restorative qualities of a clean beach versus a non-clean beach, and ghost fishing net and fishing related litter actually caused less negativity than obvious litter, like things like sandwich packets.
Oh, wow.
And things that so it's almost as if people go out onto the beach and they're looking around, if they see things that have clearly come from somebody's picnic, that was seen as an issue, whereas something like ghost fishing net wasn't really even noticed.
Right.
And I think maybe because we expect to see that, we do almost expect to see that in the environment on the coast, and yet it is still plastic. So it's that recognition that this is still litter that is out on the beach. So yeah, but we essentially as Ghostbusters, we pick up the huge nets, the big ones that for whatever reason have become adrift, and we get those put through Ocean Recovery and Odyssey Innovation's net regeneration scheme to get made into pellet, and then Rob gets them made into all sorts of things like kayaks and bins.
Wow.
And encourages people to go out on those kayaks and do paddles for plastic. So it is a beautiful circular economy link that our volunteer group has around it. But obviously all litter, as a beach cleaner, all litter is an issue, and microplastics is huge for us. On the spring tides, we see the strand lines absolutely full of multicolored microplastics, and cigarette butts. There's this endless, and now we've obviously got PPEs, we've got face masks and gloves. We're seeing it's this stream of plastic. So I guess one of the things that go at beach cleans that we encourage is, yes, we're cleaning up the plastic on the beach, but those conversations that we have when we have community beach clean are very much about what choices are you making in your household, and how are you lobbying politicians upstream, so that actually we can make changes around the influx of this avoidable plastic. That's the piece where we make greater change. So and Surfers Against Sewage, as a rep for them, we look at both angles. We look at the aspect of grassroots, but also how do you change the decisions that get made from a policy maker point of view.
100%. And I think it is important to kind of have both kind of focuses, isn't it? I was wondering, as someone quite passionate in this field, what are some of the ways that you kind of try to reduce your plastic use in your kind of everyday life?
So we're really everybody. Nobody's perfect. We're on it. We are pretty on it in terms of our shopping. We shop locally. We shop from local suppliers. We question everything that comes into our household, whether it's avoidable or not. And that's plastics, but it's also single-use, full stop. So for me, single-use plastic conversation it's a gateway conversation to carbon. It's not the only conversation. It's amazing. It's amazing to highlight this awareness of single-use plastics and the lack of infrastructure to cope with that influx of plastic, but also single-use, full stop. So we have all the obvious things, like we have soap nuts to do our washing. We have soap nuts to do our washing. We have bamboo. We make sure that we have bamboo toothbrushes. We question every single item that we have in our home as to whether it's avoidable or not. We look at the materials of the clothing that we wear. We have these bags that you put in your washing machine that avoid the fibers coming out through your breaking off your clothes and going into the water stream. So we question what we're putting back into the water course from that perspective. We certainly don't buy ready meals. We buy things in bulk rather than smaller packages. So there's absolutely loads that you can do at home to make small changes and just to really question. And I don't subscribe to the idea of, oh, this is recyclable, because so much of what goes into our recycling isn't recycled. I'd rather question, do we need to be buying the packaging in the first place, rather than thinking, oh, it's okay because it will go in the recycling. It's this misnomer. And certainly as a plastic-free communities lead for my community here, lots of our community became very passionate with all the different forms of recycling that they could do, and oh, we can do this scheme and that scheme. And when you start to dig underneath the surface of it, it's actually that's not the answer. And they're all buying loads of bioplastic stuff, and you're like, actually, that isn't the answer. And that is the challenge from a plastic-free communities point of view. Sometimes you can't give somebody, if somebody says, well, what is the answer? There are some things that you question. I don't know at this point in time what the better alternative is, but I know that that's not it.
Yeah. I was so shocked to kind of, when I was researching that, even, we think plastic is recyclable, but actually there's not the funding, there's not the resources to actually turn it into something useful. And even if, say a plastic bottle is recycled, it loses its purity over time and it degrades, and it's just not great. No,
it's not. So sorry, I've got notifications coming going ding every so often. Yeah, that's cool. That's the real one. Yeah, so it's from that point of view, we question and we buy things to last. That's the other thing. So we're really lucky in Cornwall. We've got some really amazing artists and creators making product that they've really looked at the sustainability of it. So for example, we have Finisterre down here, which is a cold water surf brand, and they're expensive. Their product is expensive, but you buy something that is sustainably sourced, and it's going to last you for ages, rather than this false economy of having that throwaway mindset. So yeah,
definitely. Maybe we could talk about the kinds of things that you find along on a beach clean, because I was watching a video from Lush, the soap company, where they're talking about this 2-minute beach clean kind of incentive, and they found a pot noodle packet from 2007 that had been there for 11 years, and also a yogurt pot from Spain.
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. And we find out we have quite a lot from Newfoundland that comes across here because of the stream. So basically at the far end of Penhale, which is, I live in Perranporth, and Penhale it's on a corner basically that catches loads and loads of litter from all over the place. So you end up with various bits of litter that are from all over the world. You can have things from Spain, certainly. You can have things from Newfoundland. Like we get a lot from Newfoundland, weirdly. Lots of lobster pot tags from there. And we've had Golden Wonder crisps that are from the 80s. We've had Pepsi cans that have come out of old dispensers, the old ancient dispensers. Every single time we go on a community beach clean, somebody will find something interesting. We have a lot of Lego from Tokyo Express, which is the container that went down with Lego in it, with loads of Lego in it. So we find Lego still in Perranporth here. We find a lot of nurdles and a lot of microplastic, clearly. A lot less single-use water bottles than we used to. We find bottle tops a lot, and we find toothbrushes and razors and things that clearly have gone through somebody's sewage system somehow, which is bizarre. And we find quite a lot of sealant, so which we think comes from boats. We think it's actually people on boats using silicon sealant and foam to repair their boats, which is really bizarre, because we would say, well, why are we getting builders material? It's a really weird thing to find, but we find lots of that, which I suspect is from a boat. I suspect that's somebody sealing up things on boats. We have a lot of that at the far end of Perranporth. Cigarette, on the main part of the beach, we have a lot of lots and lots of cigarette butts. And we have a bar on our beach, so clearly there's a habit that people don't recognize that's plastic that they're throwing away. But just a real mixture, and mostly at the far end of this beach, it's really broken up plastic, so it's not even recognizable anymore in terms of what it was, but by the time it hits there, it's almost like plastic flake, right? So it's just multicolored.
And that's where it's small, and it's really a risk to sea life, especially.
And then I'm also the Surfers Against Sewage rep for Holywell Beach, and there we find in the dunes, we find buried rubbish in the dunes. So that's where you can find, like, it is like going on an archaeological dig for plastic, and you can find things like Marks and Spencer. It says St Michael's coleslaw pots that you look at, and you're like, from the 90s, and you're thinking that somebody sat here and had a picnic and said, I know what I'll do with this. I'll just bury this now, which is just really bizarre. And then after the COVID lockdown, we had a lot of alcohol, a lot of bottles and cans, and people coming with crisp packets, and just basically almost like this rebellion of we've been locked up, so we're going to come out. And it's like, that's okay, you're going to come out and enjoy the space, but please be mindful of allowing that space to remain healthy.
Definitely. And when I first heard of the idea of the beach clean, I kind of thought that it's picking up litter, but it's a much bigger problem than that, isn't it? Because like we say, you've got plastic coming in from different countries, and it's over the years, and it's from the overuse, and it gets lost, and it goes through the rivers, the lakes, and it gets kind of blown. So it's not just litter, is it?
No, it's not just litter. It's not just beach cleans. It's hedgerows and it's street cleans, and that's that form of plastic-free community was plastic-free coastlines, and then actually moving into, well, this is whatever's starting off in the streets is going to end up at the sea at some point in time. So that's really that's quite important to register that everything's interconnected. And I think when you see something that's come across the ocean, you recognise the interconnectedness of all things. And you recognise that actually this is a big deal. For me, funny enough, even though I do lead beach cleans, for me, when we have a spring tide, usually there's uproar in our village around we must organise a beach clean. And for me, randomly, although I do organise them, my view is it would be better for us to be doing this all the time, rather than for us all to be out there doing a little bit every single time you're there, so it becomes part of your psyche, which is the Martin Dorey 2-minute beach clean view, rather than this external you must organise a beach clean. I call it peaks of outrage, which the acronym for that is POO, peaks of outrage, which comes from the issue attention cycle, and this idea that something catches our attention, we have this moment of absolute outrage about it for a while, then we realise quite how big the challenge is going to be, and then our energy drops off, and then some other disaster comes along.
So waiting for a big thing.
Yeah, and then you look at and for me, so when there's a spring tide and people say there's loads on the strand line, it's like, okay, brilliant. That means there's an opportunity for you to grab it now whilst it is on the tide line. And they say, it's really clear again. Oh, the beach is looking really clean again. It's like, but that's only because it's been pulled back out into the water. So it's that awareness of dynamic equilibrium is not necessarily common knowledge. The fact that something's just shifted, and I think that's why I work out on the beach, because anybody that I take out onto the beach for coaching, we will pick up litter as part of that conversation, because it'll be being mindful of your wider ripple effect of what you do, and mindful of the footprint that you leave behind. And it's a great metaphor to see a load of litter and say, well, how well are we doing, really, in terms of and what's the wider impact of the decision that you are going to make ecologically.
Sure.
So,
yeah. And so for the listeners at home, what kind of, if they kind of wanted to get involved and kind of maybe do a 2-minute beach clean, what kind of, how would they go about that? Do they have to take any equipment?
So funnily enough, I'm part of Cornwall Plastic Pollution Coalition, and there's lots of different groups that are connected in there. And you may have spoken with Emily from Beach Guardian. I know that she's done some work around the chemicals that are on the plastics that we pick up off the beach, and it's quite frightening, the stuff that's coming through in terms of awareness of your health and safety. So I tend to pick up stuff every time I'm at the beach anyway. If you are able to have a glove with you, that would be great, because essentially there is possibly chemicals on what you're picking up. But I do think there is, from a safety point of view, you're not going to pick up anything. When we do an organised beach clean, we have a whole safety briefing about you're not picking up sharps, not picking up things that look toxic chemicals, making sure that you're safe in terms of trip hazards, tides. If you're going to a beach to do a beach clean, you're being aware of the tide, and your own safety comes first. If you're at a beach and it's clearly somebody next to you has had a picnic and walked away from their litter, pick it up. You've probably got, at this time of the world with COVID, you've probably got hand gel on you anyway that you can, or wash your hands afterwards, so that you're not. People would see that as a potential COVID risk, and therefore, I won't pick this up. It's like, well, we're in the middle of a pandemic, but realistically, the planet is being destroyed by us. So it's like this Russian dolls to me. We can't lose sight of the fact that we need to look after the planet because we're in a pandemic. I think we can't, that easily, you could easily lose sight. And certainly during the pandemic, people have reverted back to single use. A lot of people have, because it's seen as safer, and science doesn't show that. Science shows that it's perfectly fine for you to use refill. You're sensible about washing your hands, you're sensible about your sanitation. And you don't need to have a single-use face mask. You can have a face mask that's made of something that is a bit more durable and a bit longer lasting.
Give it a wash.
So I think the thing that I'd advise is, yes, please do get involved. Don't see the environment as separate to you, because that's my Blue Health coaching is eco-centric. It's not saying this environment is to be used up by me, or it's a resource to me. It's saying I happen to be an interesting animal on this planet, and it would be nice for me to not be massively destructive whilst I'm here.
I kind of like to think of like the planet like your room, as if you're not leaving the litter on the floor. Take responsibility for it.
If you actually love the ocean and you love the beach or you love the planet, if it was your child and your child walked up to you and they had a muddy mark along their face, like you sort of go, you'd kind of wipe it off. You'd say, oh, look at you, you're a little bit scruffy. You'd want to, or if it's a pet and your pet had got injured, you'd want to make sure you looked after it, rather than that's coming from a place of love. And I think quite often with ocean activism, it comes from a place of guilt, shame, and fear. And that stuff's really important to see. It's really important for us to see. And I know this film shows a lot of, this is how bad things are, as that wake up call. And at the same time, we have to come from a place of love if we're going to make any sustainable change. So it's because actually compassion and love have got they've got more longevity than guilt and shame. Guilt and shame have that reactive, short-term kickstart, if you like, and then we need to build on that momentum. So
100%. And if there's any kind of listeners thinking, oh no, I've never sort of thought of plastic as an issue, they might be feeling overwhelming guilt perhaps, and even in their daily actions they'll start noticing the plastic use. How would you kind of recommend they navigate that kind of that guilt and move more towards that loving place?
I just think every single little thing that you do matters. So it's like every single thing, every small change that you make has an impact. So yeah, I happened to join Surfers Against Sewage in the 90s, so I was a recreational water user. So you're like a marine indicator species. You can see stuff, you see it very quickly because it appears on your beach very quickly. As we're more urbanized and we move around much more quickly and we look for convenience, that's not people's fault that's how they might have been brought up, or that's how the system operates, but actually starting to feel a little bit more empowered about saying, well, what is the one or two small things that I can do? And questioning I don't like the word convenience, because convenience usually means you say, oh, I took the convenient option. Oh, I did that because it was convenient. It doesn't mean that it was the best option. It means it's kind of like there's always like there was a trade-off.
Yeah.
It seemed to be convenient. And so anytime that you're thinking about convenience, whether that's convenience foods or or convenience because it seems to be it's easily accessible, I just ask the question: is convenience the wisest choice? Because efficiency and wisdom are not the same thing. So yeah, I think the aim is not to preach, I guess, if you're an ocean activist, because that suggests status. It suggests that you know more or you're better than, and that's that. If we want everybody to do what they can, it's recognizing and celebrating the small moves that somebody makes, and actually therefore encouraging and enthusing people to continue to build upon that, rather than saying, well, that's okay, but you're here and somebody else is here. It's not. It's that benchmarking is, oh, I'm more environmentally friendly than you. It's like, well, great. It's a shared responsibility.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in most aspects of life, actually, that building people up as opposed to, knocking them down is generally the way to go.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so if if in the kind of local areas, people wanted to get involved in the beach cleans, obviously they can do the kind of 2-minute beach clean themselves. But if there was, beyond COVID, if this kind of goes away and more group beach cleans can be done, how would somebody go about doing that?
So it's looking around you and finding community. So like, because I mentioned Surfers Against Sewage, I mentioned You Keep Britain Tidy, but I tend to link in with all of the different groups. So we have in Cornwall, and I can only speak for Cornwall, but wherever somebody is, checking globally, wherever they are, looking at their local community, because we have in Cornwall alone, you can join a marine group. We have loads of marine groups around the coast. You can go to Cornwall Wildlife Trust, they do beach cleans. You can go to Keep Britain Tidy, you can go to the Marine Conservation Society, they do beach cleans. You can go to Clean Cornwall, they do beach cleans. So there are so many different organisations, whether it's coastal or whether it's inland. And this is global. So I'm coming from a really tiny corner. We're coming from a really tiny corner of the world, aren't we? So you think whether you're out in I work out in California occasionally, like once a year, and I had to give up dairy to offset the flight, and you're making these choices and saying, oh, but whether you're in the States, wherever you are, there will be community that want to look after the space. So and finding your vibe within that. So one of the reasons I look after and think about, why is it that you want to do it? So I volunteer with British Divers Marine Life Rescue because I love marine mammals, and actually looking after marine mammals and marine birds is one of my biggest motivators for going out and beach cleaning. So that's because that's my thing. Whether it's you've joined Extinction Rebellion and you're speaking from that perspective, there'll be a different vibe, there'll be a different energy to the groups that you choose to connect with. And that's where you find your community, and you'll get all the mental health benefits of being part of a group who've got a positive social aim as well. So you then benefit from that yourself, rather than this just being this just being about the plastic. It's about what can we collectively do to help look after the space.
Yeah, and I suppose the power of social media in this age, it's never been easier to get involved in these groups and build these communities.
Yeah, I mean, I was on a call with Cornwall Plastic Pollution Coalition a couple of nights ago, and we had just this screen full of faces, and there was Clean Ocean Sailing were there. There was a couple of guys who'd got new businesses that wanted to utilize some of the materials that were picked up from the beach cleans, that they said actually we've got an outlet for these materials that doesn't require a huge amount of processing. So, which was brilliant. We can reuse and repurpose rather than recycle. And there was this screen full of people from all different organisations wanting to share. This is what we've been doing. This is how we've coped with still being active through a pandemic. And these are the ideas that we want to share with one another, so that we aren't competing, so that we're actually really, really collaborating. So, and that was just really, I mean, it was just so brilliant. Heartwarming. It was so heartwarming to see this screen full of faces and just going, all of these people are out there taking action to create change. And and that was from one group that really, really want to campaign to get a processing plant down here for marine plastics for a circular economy project, through to others who are lobbying politicians, through to others who are beach cleaning groups out on the beaches taking action at that level. So yeah, really, really, really heartwarming. And therefore any project like your project that encourages and invites more people in, because that's there is those groups, but a lot of those faces are familiar faces, and you look and you say, we're kind of talking to a group that are already connected in this vibe. So the more we make this really accessible to everybody, and that's where you take it away from just the beaches. You say the beach starts at the stream in your park, or the beach starts at your tap, at your water tap. So
yeah,
and clean recreational water is a goal for me, as somebody who enjoys using the water. So then you talk more widely about carbon and about protecting the water, really, in terms of toxicity.
Yeah, sure. And also I think on a individual level, just tuning into news articles about in this kind of area of the environmental space, following environmentally conscious people, and just kind of surrounding yourself so that you have kind of an in-stream, it can motivate your efforts as well on a daily basis.
Yeah, any decision you make, just asking the question, like asking the question when you go and buy a packet of sandwiches, how convenient, how long and how much effort do you think that it took to get that packet of sandwich, that plastic, into your hand, and how long is that product going to be in your hand before it leaves your hand? So that idea of how long you use an item for versus how much time and effort and energy went into creating it is about getting curious. And that doesn't mean you have to be a scientist or have loads of knowledge, or it's and therefore it's accessible to anybody to say, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, actually, what was the time, effort and energy it took to create this shape of plastic to wrap around this bread? That is just being fascinated by that. Because I think people, when you start talking about carbon footprints, carbon emissions, it can feel too nebulous for people. And that's the whole reason why we started with things like beach cleaning, because it felt very accessible. It is the gateway to a bigger conversation. This is something I can tangibly do, that I feel like I'm making a difference, rather than let's talk about climate change.
Yeah, very big. Yeah, 100%. And that, down to that bread wrapper analogy you gave, it does come back to mindfulness and just being aware of everything that's gone into it.
Yeah, being present, to be present.
Yeah.
And being more analog, being more connected to the analog world, being more connected to nature, to actually how does nature work, and therefore what can you learn from the way that nature works. So
yeah, brilliant. Oh, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Lizzi.
Lovely chatting with you.
Yeah, so thank you for listening today. If you'd like to learn more about Lizzi's Blue Health Coaching, definitely do so by visiting goingcoastal.blue or Going Coastal Blue on Facebook. We'll post up links with wherever this is going. But yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Lizzi.
Lovely to chat with you. Have a good rest of your week.
Thank you, and you.